and so beautiful. And the story, I mean, the words of that are so beautiful because it's true. How often do we think that we're not worthy when love or spirit says we always are? We always are. So, as somebody mentioned, our theme this month is naming the journey for paths to God. And last week we covered the first path, what Meister Eckhart terms the via positiva, where we find God in the awe and wonder of nature and all beings and all manner of expressions. And we find God by being in this world, immersed in its beauty and splendor. And today our topic is via negativa, the way of mystery. And it's the opposite but yet necessary side of via positiva. Where last week we were immersed in the light of God, today we're looking at the darkness or the mystery of God. From T.S. Eliot, I said to my soul, be still, and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. And Maria Rilke tells us, yet no matter how deeply I go down into myself, my God is dark and like a webbing made of 100 roots that drink in silence. So, the Via Positiva shows us the way of awe, of expression, of interaction with nature, with others, with the beauty of spirit that's all around us. And I look at that as the breadth of our spirituality. This is how it comes out, how we see it. But the Via Negativa takes us into the silence, down deep into our own roots. So that's the depth of our spirituality. And they come as one, like the coin with two sides, like a tree with both branches and roots. And they're equally important. We often don't take into account the side of mystery because it's not apparent. We don't see it. But it really is as important as that place that we see. Matthew Fox, in Original Blessing, writes, a light-oriented spirituality is superficial, surface-like, lacking as it does the deep, dark roots that nourish and surprise and ground the large tree. In fact, as I was preparing for today, before I even read the quote by Matthew Fox, I was thinking about branches and roots. And I remembered that when I was a junior church superintendent at Founders Church in Los Angeles, we had a big, huge California pine in front of our youth and activities building. And it was the place where we played games, where we had picnics. Sometimes we'd sit under it for our lessons. It was used a lot, and it was really, really cherished. But I noticed that the branches were becoming quite thick, and I asked the administration to please have it pruned. But before they could get to it, we had a large storm. And when we came in Sunday, it was on its side. It's completely and totally uprooted. Well, if you know California pines, you know that their root system is pretty shallow, and that system just couldn't compete against the weight of the branches and the wind. So our spiritual journey can be much like that tree. If we don't send those deep roots, learning to trust the mystery of things we cannot explain, then our enlightenment is compromised. I had a practitioner friend in Florida who was brilliant. She could teach a class. She knew everything that there was. She said all the right things. But her 34-year-old daughter died very unexpectedly. And it completely took everything out from underneath her. And she completely lost her faith, and she never recovered. So I didn't realize that until it happened, that she had not experienced the depth of her spirituality. And so, in essence, she wasn't grounded to hold that devastation in her heart until it could be healed. So I think it's hard for many of us to believe in the silence of our own soul. It's hard for us to meditate. It's hard for me to meditate. I've been at it for almost 50 years now. It's still hard. It's hard for us to sit still and to sit with questions rather than jumping to the answers. We always want to jump to the answers. As a matter of fact, I smile at myself and I smile at other people when I hear us say, I've just got to figure that out. You know? Because the minute we say that, we're in trouble. It's not about figuring out anything. It's staying with the silence until Spirit draws that answer up from the deepest depths of us. And that is what is asked of us in the Via Negativa. We often think of the Via Negativa as the negative sides in our life, the pain, the suffering, and the shadow side. And while it may include those things, it generally does, but it's much, much broader than that. You know, we just finished our quantum activist course, and we focused on things like the meaning of our dreams, like the recognition of our intuitive wisdom and being able to call that forth, and the need for silence and meditation as a way of connecting to Source. That's all part of the Via Negativa, the way of mystery. That's where we get in touch with that deepest part of ourselves. So how do we befriend this Via Negativa? Matthew Fox says, first, it is healthy to reflect on how, in fact, our lives are already bound in darkness without our having to perform any extraordinary manipulations. For example, we all began in the dark. We lived apparently quite contented lives for 9 months in the dark. The womb was not a fearful place. So we can also think further, like, most of what makes our bodies work happens in the dark. Our heart is beating in the dark. Our lungs are breathing in the dark. Our stomach is digesting. Our blood is circulating. Our brain is processing, all in the dark. So we already do have a relationship with that mystery. We just need to become more familiar with it so that it's a place of comfort for us instead of fear. In Original Blessing, Matthew Fox emphasizes two themes. He has four, but we're going to look at two that help us befriend the Via Negativa: emptying and being emptied. Emptying is proactive. We take initiative. It's a time of deliberately and consciously letting go. Letting go of things like beliefs that no longer serve. Letting go of things we may be holding against someone else or against ourselves. The emptying of images, especially images of who we think we are. You know, many years ago, I was in a workshop where we were asked the question, who am I? And we began with I am, and then we finished that, and then gave a definition, I am a wife. And then we followed that statement with, but this is not the truth of me, who am I? And we went through absolutely everything. This is not the truth of me, who am I? And then we went through our attributes. I am kind and compassionate, but that's not who I am, who am I? That's not the truth of who I am. I am mean sometimes, but that's not who I am, who am I? And it went on and on and on. And the truth is, as long as we start our statement with I am, we are limiting who we truly are. Just as a Tao that can be named is not the true Tao, the essence of who I am cannot be named by telling you who I am. You and I are God in expression. And as such, we don't have a definition. God cannot be defined. The Tao cannot be named. You and I, in essence, cannot be named. So asking who am I is a wonderful exercise that peels off the layers of how we identify ourselves so that we can touch those parts, as we can sense those parts of us that cannot be named. And if you want an experience of emptying, I suggest you do this because it really does work. You know, in our meditation time, we can also let go of everything that keeps us from seeing how beloved we are, just as Robin's saying. It might be a time of releasing resentments, emptying ourselves of the toxic attachments that come from holding grudges or anger. It might be that we release shame, forgiving ourselves of past wrongdoings or foolish behavior. It might be releasing our ego images of not being worthy, of not being enough. And as we start releasing all these things, we will come to the place where we don't need to release much. Maybe just what happened during the day. Who do I need to forgive? Where do I need to forgive myself? So we're no longer attached to what our ego thinks is important. And when we can get to that point, then we trust the process of our own spiritual growth, and then we truly begin to feel that peace that passes all understanding. Doesn't mean we're not going to hit a dip, but it does mean that we have helped those roots grow deep. And also we should recognize the value of being gentle with ourselves. John O'Donohue in Anam Cara, the book of Celtic wisdom, writes, "The world of the soul is secret. The secret and the sacred are sisters. When the secret is not respected, the sacred vanishes. Consequently, reflection should not shine too severe or aggressive a light in on the world of the soul." So it is a time to be gentle, not shine a bright light, but just let that candlelight that's within us illuminate who and what we are in that place that's deep. So for us to take the lead on our own of befriending the darkness, we need to make room for those times of silence, of meditation, contemplation, so that we can empty this vessel we call our soul, allowing it to grow freely without interference, and then we can allow it to be filled with that love of God. In an interview, Oprah Winfrey asked Dr. Michael Beckwith to explain the Via Negativa. He said, "It is a time when you're losing your identification with a previous identity, but you don't yet have an identification with what's newly emerging. You're in the dark. You know who you used to be, but you're not that anymore. You know who you are, who you are becoming, you're not that either." So there's fear, there's disconnect, there's pain when we're in this place of between identities, and we can find this in our own lives when it's disrupted by great change. The death of a spouse or a child, divorce, moving to an unfamiliar place, being let go or retiring after years in the same company, having a health challenge that changes the way we've lived. In situations like this, we're between identities. And if we can sit with the pain, sit with the confusion, without numbing ourselves with drugs, alcohol, television, or shopping, that pain will become our source of transformation. We will cope, we will move on, and we will be spiritually deepened because of it. Matthew Fox says, "Facing the darkness, admitting the pain, allowing the pain to be pain is never easy. This is why courage, big-heartedness, is the most essential virtue on the spiritual journey. But if we fail to let pain be pain, then pain will haunt us in nightmarish ways. We will become pain's victim instead of the healers we might become." There is value in pain, and it helps if we know that at some level, even while we're in the midst of it. It can help sensitize us to beauty and delight. Sometimes something we have ordinarily ignored becomes a thing of great meaning when we're in pain or confusion. We all know the story of the man traveling across a field who encounters a tiger. He flees, the tiger after him, and coming to a precipice, he catches hold of the root of a wild vine and swings himself down over the edge. The tiger sniffs at him from above. Looking down, he finds another tiger waiting for him at the bottom. So he's there by the vine, and then two mice start to gnaw away at the vine. and he sees a luscious strawberry near him. Grasping the vine with one hand, he plucks the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tastes. How this little strawberry that wouldn't be anything becomes his lifeline. And this is what we have when we use pain as a way through to our own transformation. Pain can lead to justice, as pain is shared and people find commonality in their suffering. The women now who are coming forward after the incredible abuses of Jeffrey Epstein, they are helping each other to heal by sharing their stories. Not only their stories in front of everybody, but from themselves. They are experiencing a bond. I just watched David, is it Hobbs from the Hoggs, from the Parkland shooting, one of the graduate students, and they still have formed this bond, coming out of their deepest, darkest pain. Pain gives us compassion, because we can understand and be with each other in pain. I may not know exactly what you're going through, but if I've had a similar experience, I can draw from that and say, I can feel what you're feeling. I may not know it, I may not understand it completely, but in that compassion, I feel for and with you. I found an article, it's originally from Guidepost magazine in 1972, and it's about Corrie ten Boom. She was arrested by the Nazis along with the rest of her family for hiding Jews in their home during the Holocaust. She was sent to the camps along with her sister Betsy, who perished there just days before Corrie's own release on December 31st, 1944. Inspired by Betsy's example of selfless love and forgiveness amid extreme cruelty and persecution, Corrie established a post-war home for other camp survivors trying to recover from the horrors they had escaped. And she went on to travel widely as a missionary, preaching God's forgiveness and the need for reconciliation. Corrie's devout moral principles were tested when by chance she came face to face with one of her former tormentors. And I want to close my portion today with her story from her autobiography, The Hiding Place. It was in a church in Munich that I saw him, a balding, heavy-set man in a gray overcoat, a brown felt hat clutched between his hands. People were filing out of the basement room where I'd just spoken. It was 1947, and I had come from Holland to defeated Germany with the message that God forgives. And that's when I saw him, working his way forward against the others. One moment, I saw the overcoat and the brown hat. The next, a blue uniform and a visored cap with its skull and crossbones. It came back with a rush, the huge room with its harsh overhead lights, the pathetic pile of dresses and shoes in the center of the floor, the shame of walking naked past this man. I could see my sister's frail form ahead of me, ribs sharp beneath the parchment skin. Betsy, how thin you were. Betsy and I had been arrested for concealing Jews in our home during the Nazi occupation of Holland. This man had been a guard at Ravensbrück concentration camp where we were sent. You mentioned Ravensbrück in your talk, he was saying. I was a guard there. No, he did not remember me. But since that time, he went on, I have become a Christian. I know that God has forgiven me for the cruel things I did there. But I would like to hear it from your lips as well. Fräulein, his hand came out. Will you forgive me? And I stood there, I whose sins had every day to be forgiven and could not. Betsy had died in that place. Could he erase her slow, terrible death simply for the asking? It could not have been many seconds that he stood there, hand held out, but to me it seemed hours as I wrestled with the most difficult thing I ever had to do. For I had to do it. I knew that. The message that God forgives has a prior condition, that we forgive those who have injured us. If you do not forgive men their trespasses, Jesus said, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. And I stood there with coldness clutching my heart. But forgiveness is not an emotion. I knew that too. Forgiveness is an act of the will, and the will can function regardless of the temperature of the heart. Jesus, help me, I prayed silently. I can lift my hand. I can do that much. You supply the feeling. And so woodenly, mechanically, I thrust my hand into the one stretched out to me. And as I did, an incredible thing took place. The current started in my shoulder, raced down my arm, sprang into our joined hands. And then this healing warmth seemed to flood my whole being, bring tears to my eyes. I forgive you, brother, I cried with all my heart. For a long moment, we grasped each other's hands, the former guard and the former prisoner. I had never known God's love so intensely as I did then. The human heart can go the lengths of God. This is the healing power of the way of mystery, the Via Negativa. Thank you. Namaste.